Hi, and welcome back to the Rocana 2.0 launch. We're using a digital medium, the Cube, to launch a digital company, Rocana's new product. I'm here with Omer Trajman, CEO of Rocana. Omer.
Great to be here. This is exciting.
And I'm Peter Burris, and I'm the Chief Research Officer of SiliconANGLE Wikibon. And what we're doing is we're talking about the business problems of digital business, specifically how data and operations are going to evolve and how companies like Rocana are providing tooling that makes that possible. So let's dig a little bit more into this notion of business value, where we're eventually going to get to understanding what companies can do almost in sequence to start to retool their operations from the IT or the data up. So let's start here, because we were talking in between the break. At the end of the day, one of the reasons why we're driving this digital business notion is not because the technology is cool or because the Harvard Business Review writes about it. We're driving it because customers want digital engagement. Customers want to be able to buy things on their phones. They want to be able to take their phones and their information into stores, into retail outlets. They want digital engagement because it puts them more in charge.
Absolutely. And customers not only want digital engagement for the sake of digital inconvenience, they want it because it helps them identify, and marketers want it, it helps them identify with the business as a single unit. You go shopping or you interact as a business with another organization, that's one business. It's not a bunch of silos. It's not a bunch of departments. You expect a uniform interaction. When something goes wrong and you kind of peel back the layers of the onion and look under the
You being
cover.
the customer in this sense.
Right. When something goes, something goes wrong for you as a customer, and if you could, sort of look under the covers and see what's actually happening, you find dozens of organizations all scrambling, right? It's a fire drill every time I click reload and the page doesn't refresh. I go to checkout and the shopping cart doesn't work. I try to make a delivery and it gets routed, the truck gets routed to the wrong location, right? Under the covers, you have a bunch of different folks in operations, now largely IT operations, because everything's digital, right? And they're scrambling. Right? What happened? Where did it happen? Who has the data? Who kept track of? Whose fault was it? Right? Lots of finger pointing. That's the state of the world today.
Well, and they're still scrambling in the business, as we said in the previous section. They're saying, giddy up, giddy up. The business people are saying, I need it now. I need it now. I have a customer that requires response, as the IT organization is scrambling. So let's tie that back to the role that data is playing within operations. How do you foresee data as an asset evolving within business and therefore having an impact on how the mission of IT and the makeup of IT is likely to evolve?
So we think of this as a crawl, walk, run, right? And people are actually taking advantage of data today. It's in pockets. The digital natives, right, the sort of Google, Facebook, Amazon of the world, they do this very well. Most companies are just starting to learn how to do it. And what they're realizing is that data can help them understand how the business is operating. If you take those 40 different silos within IT and they're all just, step one, look at the same data, right? Let's have an operational view of what happened end to end so we can all play from the same playbook, right? Then we can solve the problems faster. We reduce the firefights. We can start introducing automation when we see together the same problems over and over again. We can start introducing ways that will reduce the burden from manually stitching together and running these systems. So the crawl is, let's just get the IT house in order, and data is the key to that, right? In fact, lack of data is what's caused it.
So let's talk about the things that have to happen from that crawl standpoint. One is you have to be able to put the appropriate instrumentation inside applications and inside some of these systems, right?
You do, and what's interesting is that most of it's there. Right? If you do a survey across an organization, people have over the past decade or so been educated to instrumenting, to logging, right? The systems do it today. All the gear you buy from vendors does it. This whole DevOps movement is largely educating developers at a minimum, log something, ideally generate metrics, right? Tell the other parts of the system what's going on so I don't have to go back and do, Java bytecode instrumentation to understand what's happening, just build it in first class. And you have the tooling that can take older applications and start extracting what's happening. So the data is actually getting generated, but then it falls on the floor.
Right, so now we need a warehouse where we can put the data and we have some understanding of how that data is structured.
Exactly. We think of it as the central nervous system, right? It actually ties everything together. We talked about this in the first segment, is if you like the body analogy, right? If you had separate parts of the body, each kind of reacting immediately to their own local sensory input, you would not be able to crawl. You'd not be able to walk and run, of course, right? So once you have a central nervous system, you can actually do coordinated steps. And when you have that data in real time, as we introduced with Rocana 2.0, you can actually change the nature of the business. You have a first responder experience, so you can look at what just happened and what happened elsewhere or in the organization. And you can start introducing some of these agile IT technologies, the PaaS systems like Cloud Foundry, like private clouds like OpenStack and public clouds to allow the business to move faster.
So I want to come back to this notion of first responder system, but the third thing I think we need to do is, let me run something by you. Many years ago, because I've been working with large IT organizations, providing consulting and advisory services for a long time now, and I'd sit in a meeting with a group of people, and if there was a problem, you could almost predict that the problem was caused by the individual who said, well, yeah, I just made a change, but it couldn't possibly be my system that caused the problem.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's the guy. That's the guy that messed up, or that's the guy that messed us all up. So I think the third thing is that we need to utilize the instrumentation, bring the data in a place where we actually can have visibility on it. But thirdly, we have to get the IT organization to themselves be data-driven,
right,
which is not necessarily an easy thing in a world where finger pointing is the routine and everybody's trying to protect themselves.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit.
So the state of the world is actually slightly more complex. It's not often the last change. It's that change was a response to another change, was a response to another change, was a response to the original change that actually caused the problem, which may have been months ago. Right? And so unless IT starts saying, okay, we want to look at what were all the things that happened along the way, what's the data evidence tell us, right? Security, I think, is starting to get this, and operations kind of following suit behind them. What's the trail of evidence in the form of data and events that's leading us to, oh yeah, this is where it started, this is the cascade, right? It's almost like, you know, and Eric might talk about this later, it's like a crime map. Right? There was an incident and you're doing forensics. And so we've basically captured that experience in software in a way that you can do it at scale, Fortune 100 global scale, multi-data center, multi-cloud, as a drop-in product. Right? And so, yes, there are still requirements to help IT understand how to use the data. We believe step one is don't assume IT is full of data scientists waiting for stuff to analyze. They've got jobs to do right now. Introduce tooling that makes it obvious to them what's actually going on. That's been the founding philosophy behind everything we build at Rocana.
So give them what they need to be data-driven. Don't ask them to learn the mechanics of data-driven.
Right. They don't have the time. They've got, you know.
So now we're crawling.
Now we're crawling.
So let's talk about walk. Once we're taking advantage of the instrumentation, we got the data, and we've got tooling for people so that they can change their behavior. Now we want to walk. What's the next set of things we need to do?
What we see happening next is once IT starts to realize that data is actually the underlying source that is illuminating what actually happened. They now have access to more. The machines are doing a lot more of the number crunching for them. They start thinking about how do we introduce some of our expertise and logic into the system. If we've got that one guy we always call to solve this one problem, if we can capture how that person goes about solving that problem and start introducing it from an automation fashion, that actually is going to free us up to start doing what we really want to start doing, is looking at where this data is telling us the business is going. Start doing more planning, start anticipating more.
So now we're building new capabilities into the system and we need to run.
Exactly. Running, which may sound a little futuristic, I think, certainly in the Fortune 500.
But there are certainly some companies that are doing it today.
Absolutely. Running is where we see IT taking the data, right? And remember, there's a handful of events that are the transaction. There's maybe 1 or 2 order of magnitude more that is sort of the user behavior around it. And then there's thousands or tens of thousands of events that are actually happening within the system. IT is sitting on a treasure trove of data. They know what's happening to the business before the business knows what's happening to the business, before the customer knows what's happening. And so
they can know. what's happening to the business
yes.
before the business knows what's happening to the
Yes, they have the
business.
potential. The data
Correct.
is there.
It's
right?
the potential.
So taking that and being able to say, we see that, let me give a really concrete and possibly incredibly boring example that's very impactful, right? We see that point of sale systems have this kind of error rate, this kind of transaction rate. You know, the crawl is, let's just make sure that we resolve point of sale system issues before the store calls us up and says we're out of service, right? The walk is, let's make sure that we optimize the process so that we're doing the updates at low peak times, we're doing them at night, we've given ourselves enough runway, we actually avoid the problems to begin with, IT is more efficient. The run is, when I look at the flow of data from a particular store and I compare it to what was happening a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and to what's happening in the other stores, and I see 3 cash registers online instead of the typical 4, and the dollar volume in that store is down, right, and it's not an operational issue, then the business is losing money because someone called in sick, because the cash register isn't open. That's a revenue opportunity right there, and you can start extending that to the mobile experience, the web experience. IT has access to all of that data, and they see it as it's happening.
And not only does it take revenue offline right now, it also agitates a customer, which means it takes revenue offline in the future.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have now talked about the business problems here at the Rocana 2.0 launch. I'm speaking with Omer Trajman. And next we're going to bring up Eric Sammers to talk about how the underlying technology of many of the things that we're talking about are going to work. So you're on theCUBE, stay with us for a few minutes, and let's get into some of the technologies that are going to make this vision real.